Hello, this is Alistair Reynolds, author of Revelation Space, and you're listening to Cast of Wonders, an Escape Artists podcast.
This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 265 for 10th of September 2017. A Wish and a Hope and a Dream by M. Darusha Wehm, a Cast of Wonders original. Darusha writes science fiction and speculative poetry as M. Darusha Wehm, and mainstream poetry and fiction as Darusha Wehm. Science fiction books include Beautiful Red, Children of Arcadia, and the Anderson Dexter cyberpunk detective series. Mainstream novels include the Devi Jones Locker young adult series and The Home for Wayward Parrots, forthcoming from New West Press. Darusha's short fiction and poetry have appeared in many venues, including Arsenica, Nature, Escape Pod, and several anthologies. Darusha is originally from Canada, but currently lives in Wellington, New Zealand, after spending the last several years sailing the Pacific. For more information, visit darusha.ca, which we'll link for you in the show notes. The story is narrated by Setsu Uzume, who spent their formative years in and out of dojos. They also trained in a monastery in rural China, studying Taoism and swordplay. Setsu is a member of Codex and Sufwa, as well as the assistant editor at Podcastle. And while they have dabbled in many arts, only writing and martial arts seem to have stuck. We'll have links for their website and Twitter account in the show notes. And now we've a tale to tell.
A Wish and a Hope and a Dream by M. Darusha Wehm. You have always been a princess. When you are 6 years old, your hat is a cardboard cone covered in glitter glue with a cellophane veil. Your dress began life as a pillowcase in the free box at the Goodwill. Your best friend Inez has a store-bought costume, her gown soft and sky blue like Princess Karima's. You aren't envious, though. You love your pillowcase dress and hat that makes you almost as tall as your mother. Inez twirls around and around until she nearly falls over, clutching you to stay upright. Oh, I'll never get used to riding a magic carpet. You giggle and say, "That's why I ride in a carriage pulled by 8 golden ponies." "Can I come to the ball with you, then?" Inez sinks to the ground, her skirt billowing around her like a cloud. "Aren't they adorable?" Inez's father says, his eyes crinkling. "Yeah," your mother says, "off in their own little world." "Come on," Mr. Solano says. "That's one of the great things about being a kid, all that imagination, all those dreams." He looks at you, then his eyes dart back to your mother. "They can be anything they want at this age. Might as well let them enjoy it." "You're right," your mother says, handing him an old ice cream bucket. "Thanks for taking them. I can really use the rest." "It's no trouble," he says, then kneels down to where you and Inez are sitting, playing with the material of her dress. "Come on, my 2 little princesses, let's go get some candy." You get up and your mother adjusts the sash on your dress. "Only 2 pieces on the way home," she says. "You want it to last until Christmas, okay?" You nod, excited about the prospect of even 2 pieces of candy. It's been forever since you've had candy. Your family has been eating spaghetti with ketchup for days. You love spaghetti and ketchup, not realizing that it's just what's left at the end of the food bank hamper. You also don't know that your mother lost her job, which is why she is there when you get home from school and has had time to make your costume. You know your father is working double shifts, though. That's why he isn't there to see you in your pretty dress. Your mom goes to take a photo as you and Inez stand together, grinning at each other while she fumbles with her old phone. "Come on," Inez says, grabbing your hand. "We need to hurry if we're going to get to the ball on time." When you are 9, both your parents are working. You get the official Princess app for your birthday, and each day after school, you and Inez lie on the Lady Dawn pink comforter she's had on her bed since you were little, looking at the latest photo shoots and reading about the princesses. Did you see that Cheyenne just got back from a trip to New Zealand? You say, paging through the latest updates. They wouldn't let her bring Wolf into the country with her. Isn't that awful? It's not as if he's some ordinary dog. He's like partially part of her. It's like last year, Inez says, when that one country wouldn't let Princess Karima travel on her flying carpet within their border. I know, how dumb. What's airspace security anyway? You say, rolling your eyes. You both go back to the pictures. I can't decide if Karima or Cheyenne is my favorite, Inez says a few minutes later. Rona, you say, your fingers tracing the flowing curls of her beautiful red hair. Rona? But she doesn't even look like you. She's so pale. You don't look like any of them with your skinny legs and bitten fingernails. You shrug. She's beautiful. They're all beautiful, Inez says, her forehead wrinkling. When I'm 10, Mom says I can get my hair cut like Karima's. She holds up the ends of her long black hair, effecting a makeshift bob. She said no to the eyeliner, though. Inez lets her hair fall back down. How about you? You don't know what to do with makeup. Your mother wears little, but one afternoon when both your parents were at work, you spent an hour in the bathroom with her eyeshadow, blush, and lipstick. The best you could do was make yourself look like a clown. You can tell that Inez would never look like a clown, but she's pretty to begin with, everyone says so. You are clever, or strong, never pretty. My hair's okay the way it is, you say, running your fingers through the short cut. I'd look dumb with long hair. Inez shrugs, and the two of you look at pictures of her with the different haircuts until it's time for you to go home. At night, when you can't sleep, you imagine you are Rona, with a gown of green velvet, a mind sharp enough to trick a wizard, a face pretty enough to bewitch an entire kingdom, and a long trail of flaming red hair. When you are 12, Inez gets weird. All she wants to talk about is romance. You think it's because of Princess Mei Ling's wedding last month. Don't you think Cheyenne's prince is better looking than Mei Ling's prince? Inez asks. You don't know what to say. You don't care about the princes. I mean, I know he's older, she says, not waiting for you to answer, but I think he looks distinguished. That silver hair at his temples makes him look, I don't know, classy, like one of those actors in a black and white movie. She flicks through the images on her phone. She bought the Princess app with her first babysitting money, and now you sit apart in her room, each looking at your own pictures on your own phones. Do you ever dream about your wedding? I think about it all the time. Mei Ling's was so beautiful, Inez says, not seeming to notice that you haven't said a word. I want gold leaf on my wedding cake, and a dress like hers, but with blue accents, not pink. And what did you think about her prince's uniform? Guys look great in uniforms. She stops talking and looks over at you. Want to watch the video again on the big screen? The Solanos have a big TV in their living room, and you often go over to watch movies. You nod, even though you think the wedding was kind of boring. But all the princesses were there, and Rona looked incredible in her formal gown. You watch it all again for the millionth time, impatiently sitting through the wedding part to get to the ball. When Mei Ling enters the main salon on a flying horse, you gasp with delight as if you'd never seen it before. When Rona dances with her prince, time stops. That night, you dream that instead of Rona's prince, it is you she dances with, your arm around her waist, her head on your shoulder. You twirl around the ballroom, your feet not quite touching the floor, her hair flying behind you both in a trail of auburn curls. When you are 17, you work part-time in a bakery. Your alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, Rona's voice singing her theme song sweetly in your ear. It almost makes waking in the dark bearable. You spend 2 hours each morning decorating the elaborate fairy cakes that each cost more than you'll be paid that week. Then you go to school and try to stay awake in class. Inez texts you in history. New Peen movie opens tomorrow. Let's go. You've been saving all your bakery money and summer job wages in a college fund. You know now that your parents can barely keep up with their debts and won't be able to help, and you won't have the grades for a scholarship. Your father has steady work in construction, but it was never enough when your mother couldn't find work. Your mother went to college, and she's always told you that an education is the most important thing. Wishing for something won't make it so, she says. You have to put yourself out to get anywhere in this world. She says that it was her degree which got her the job she has now, assistant to a junior manager at a big firm downtown. Who would you hire? She asks you. Someone just out of high school or someone who's been to college? You can't just expect to get a good job without it anymore. Sometimes you feel like you want to scream whenever you hear the word college. But you know your mother is right. Your parents seem to work all the time. You can't remember the last time the three of you did something together that wasn't a hasty meal or a half hour in front of the second-hand, tiny TV. Between school and the bakery, it feels like you work all the time, too. You text Inez back. Kay. You get to the theater 2 hours early and still barely get in. The audience is mostly teens and college-age women, a few boyfriends, and just a smattering of guys there of their own accord. But there are hardly any little kids. This isn't one of those origin story films. It's a grown-up story about a post-princess life featuring Bianca, the first of the princesses, a stately matron now, and Leanne, who became a princess when you were a kid. The story begins as Leanne arrives at Bianca's castle in her carriage, glorious and shining with her footmen bustling about. She enters the great hall to find a table groaning under a feast of delights. Inez elbows you and whispers, "Those are the fairy cakes you make." It's true. The bakery where you work specializes in replica royal sweets. Being around such beautiful things is the main appeal of the job. You nod and shush her. Over the next 90 minutes, you are transported to a magic world that you can barely believe exists in the same universe as your own life. Gorgeous silken gowns transformed from ordinary box store dresses, flying chariots whisking the princesses to fabulous balls or feasts laden with luscious food no one eats. Lives of glamour and leisure. For a moment, you wonder if it is even real. Then comes the moment you've all been waiting for. Everyone has been talking about the rumor that a new princess would be revealed in the film. Your breath catches in your throat when you see her for the first time. You know it's her. She is too radiant, too perfect to be working in some grimy urban store. Bianca and Leanne have gotten lost on their way back to Leanne's chateau and walk into a small Korean grocery in some nameless city looking for directions. The girl behind the counter must be about your age, but her days of worrying about grades and college are over. The princesses recognize her true nature immediately and take her away with them. No one objects. It is as if it were ordained in the stars. They say that the movie story is based on her real life, that she really was discovered in some store like that last year. So-yeon, an urban princess, elevated from the streets to a castle in the clouds. Your eyes fill with tears. You can't count the number of times you've wished for that moment. To have what you've known all your life finally be reflected in someone else's eyes. That you, too, are more than you appear to be. If So-yeon could be plucked like a flower from her life of toil, surely it could happen to anyone. Even to you? When you are 22, you pull a crumpled bill from your pocket. It's enough for a draft beer at the campus bar, and you've earned one. You are $30,000 in debt. You can't remember the last time you slept more than 5 hours in a night, but tomorrow you will walk on stage with hundreds of other people and walk off with a degree. The bartender slides the beer towards you and takes your money, her dark eyes lingering on you for a moment. You're not in the mood to talk, so you take your beer to a quiet table near the back. You sip and look around. There aren't as many people in the place as there would be on a Friday night, but at 3 p.m. on the day before graduation, it's crowded enough. You recognize the students' uniform of thrift store coats, broken book bags, and 5-year-old phones. You notice a guy from your post-structural economics class a couple of tables over. He gives you the eye contact and nod, then goes back to his animated conversation. He's wearing a pale yellow t-shirt with a faded image of Princess Bonita printed on it. You know he's wearing it ironically, but you had that exact shirt when you were a kid. You remember working with what's-his-name, Charlie, Carl, something like that, on a class project. You made this infographic that showed how many people out of 100 ever got out of the economic class where they were born. It was a good chart. You got an A-. Your phone buzzes and you flip it over. Inez. You haven't seen her since Christmas when you were both home and her engagement news overshadowed the holiday. She found her prince. Going home after grad, let's get together. She texts. I'll be back this weekend. Coffee? You text. Yeah. Want to ask you about cakes, she texts. You wonder how she and Mikhail can afford a fairy cake for their wedding. They are both going to be paying off their student loans as long as you are, and neither has a job lined up after graduation. Your mother told you that they think they will have to live with Inez's parents after they get married. It's no coincidence, Carl or Charlie's slurred voice interrupts your thoughts from across the bar. We're living in a new feudalism ruled by unrealistic hopes to join an unattainable elite. Statistically, the rags to riches dream isn't real, but we think if we just work hard enough, it'll happen for us. We all think we're kings in peasants' clothes, but we're just children playing make-believe. It's time we decided to live in the real world. Other voices rise to join his in belligerent agreement, and you recognize arguments you've heard yourself make on other afternoons like this one. Maybe Inez has it right. Buy an expensive cake. Have a fairy tale wedding day. What's another few $1,000s? At least then you'd have something to remember. One moment when you were someone's princess. But it's so hard to let the dream go. You don't feel like a peasant, you never have. But you know if you keep pretending that one day you'll meet your fairy godmother, she'll wave her wand and suddenly everything will all be fine. That you'll spend your life being a servant to a fantasy. You finish your beer, thinking of those days when all it took for a magical transformation was a rolled-up piece of cardboard and a pillowcase dress. You flick your finger over your phone, Rona's beautiful face filling the screen. Those blue eyes. That red hair. Can't you live in your imagination with her just a little longer? After all, you've always been a princess, haven't you?
I don't buy lottery tickets. Mostly because my math skills are just good enough to know how infinitesimal the odds are that I'll win. But every time one of those mega jackpots comes up, I think about it, I dream about it, and what a win could mean. Research shows that about half the people who win life-changing amounts of money later regret their win. There's lots of reasons why, but they boil down to the fact that a sudden change in anything, wealth, lifestyle, circumstances, often puts the person in an experience so new they don't have the skills to cope with the reality of their new situation. Our protagonist struggles with their best friends winning what I guess you'd call the relationship lottery in our story. But did anything really change for Inez? Like our protagonist, Inez is still in debt, still a recent grad in a tough job market, still craving that moment of princess perfection in a wedding cake. Just because our protagonist doesn't want a fairy tale wedding doesn't mean they don't want romance, happiness, stability, or an escape from reality. It's trite and inaccurate to say money can't buy happiness. But that's not the point. Maybe the act of dreaming of what could be is how we cope with the disappointments of reality. What a dream come true looks like changes as we change, even if it still takes the form of a childhood costume. Join us next week for...
Jun had no idea how to use the Scarecrow's secret. She couldn't imagine her parents not loving her. Had Reiko done something horrible? Or had they not wanted a daughter in the first place? If they didn't love her, why did they buy her so many presents? It didn't make sense. Maybe the Scarecrow had lied.
The original paraphernalia for the Flash Fiction contest had been lost long ago, and the black box now rested on the stool had been put into use even before Old Man Stewart, the oldest man in town, was born. Mr. Lieberman spoke frequently to the forum members about making a new box, but no one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that had preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. Mr. Garrett and his oldest daughter Victoria hold the black box securely on the stool until Mr. Lieberman can stir the papers thoroughly with his hand. Because so much of the ritual had been forgotten or discarded, Mr. Lieberman had been successful in having slips of paper substituted for the chips of wood that had been used for generations. Chips of wood, Mr. Lieberman had argued, had been all very well when the village was tiny, but now that the population was more than 300 and likely to keep on growing, it was necessary to use something that would fit more easily into the black box. Pseudopod proudly presents the start of the 5th incarnation of the Escape Artist Flash Fiction Contest. Winners of the contest will be determined by the members of the forums. The winning stories will be published in an episode in the author's paid pro rates. Head over to the forums, take up your stone, and perform your civic duty by joining in the harvest festivals of the October Country.
Cast of Wonders relies on your donations to pay our authors and narrators and to bring you the best in young adult audio fiction week after week. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider making a donation. There are lots of ways you can support us. We're on Patreon, and there are buttons for PayPal donations on our website. Every single donation, whether a one-off or a monthly subscription, makes a huge difference, and you have, as always, our heartfelt thanks. You can share the love for this story by leaving both it and us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our episodes are designed with your commute in mind, so please share them with your family and friends. You can also join the discussion on the EA forum, forum.escapeartists.net. And we're at Cast of Wonders on Twitter. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Danny Daly and Catherine Inskip, associate editors Amy Brennan, Alexis Goebel, Andrew Kim, Aiken Patel, Susie Rodriguez, Muddy Schleider, Chris Tang, and Xander Simon. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, and I remain, as always, your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share it, download it, and listen on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov, available at Promo DJ or his Facebook page, which you can find in our show notes. Thanks for listening.